guys, welcome back to Days of Darkness and welcome to my review for Event Horizon. This one came out in 1997. It is starring Lawrence Fishburne, Sam Neill, and Richard T. Jones and was directed by Paul W.S. Anderson. Now, a couple quick notes before we get into the film review. Sorry this review is coming out so fucking late. Typically, I like to aim for at least a day in the weekend, and unfortunately, just did not work out like that this time around. But don't worry, I am planning on making that up to you with the Purge review coming now in less than a week, and also a little bonus video as well, which if you follow me on the socials, you already know what that is. And speaking of the Purge, we announced last week that the Purge series is going to be the next series review, so I'm hoping you guys are all excited for that. But with that being said, we are not talking about the Purge, we are talking about Event Horizon. And much like the Purge movies, this is one that I was never really familiar with. I had watched it one other time, and that was very recently, and I watched it again for the sake of the review. And, you know, I've heard a lot of people talk this movie up. I've heard a lot of praise being thrown towards this movie, and mostly rightfully so. I really do enjoy this movie. I wouldn't put it up there as like one of my all-time favorites or anything like that, but I think what we have here is a very solid, very entertaining sci-fi horror film. There's just a couple things that are holding it back that I really, really think kind of damper the film. Not to the point where it's just straight up unenjoyable, but there are a couple things that I do think could have been improved. But as far as positives are concerned, I absolutely adore the concept. You know, a lot of the praise that I would hear of this movie, I heard a lot of people comparing it to Alien. And going in blind, I kind of thought, okay, it's going to be some sort of monster something. That's just not the case at all. What we have here instead is a spaceship, the Event Horizon, that is designed to essentially teleport through space. And it does that via a black hole. And that black hole essentially folds space, and you can be in one spot 1 minute, and then boom, within a millisecond, you're 10,000 light years away in another area of space. Which is a good idea in theory, but unfortunately, Dr. Weir, played by Sam Neill, did not take into account the fact that, you know, during that millisecond that spaceship is in that black hole, it has to go somewhere. It can't just not be anywhere. It has to be somewhere during that teleportation process, as quick as it may be. And essentially what ends up happening is when they take this thing out for the first run, it goes to hell. It goes to the closest thing that you could really call hell. It's just this parallel dimension filled with the absolute, just most evil fucking shit imaginable, and you get a very, very limited view of that evil in the movie, which I love. I love the fact that, you know, you don't really see this dimension. It's not, you know, a physical, and there's no physical, tangible elements that you can really see beyond the effects that it has on people. But I love the mystery there, and I love that you never get to see really what these people experience. And I also love that this fucking, this parallel universe is so evil and so sadistic that the ship, which was missing for 7 years, I think they said in the film, it's missing for 7 years, and during that time that it's just floating through this hellscape, it develops sentience, and it becomes a living organism, and it treats the passengers inside the ship as you would a parasite. And what does our body do to a parasite or a germ? Our immune system attacks those parasites, attacks those germs, and eventually, you know, kills them. In very brutal fashion as well, might I add. Just some absolutely haunting shit. We don't get a lot of view when it comes to the original crew and the crew that, you know, went on the Event Horizon and had that first voyage. A lot of their experience is shrouded in mystery. We get, you know, some pretty grisly details about what happened to them. But Many would say, thankfully, a good amount of it is left up to the imagination. Not me, though, because I'm a sick fucking freak. And I really would have liked a prequel at some point, just to see what the fuck happened to them. But it's not a perfect world, so we did not get that. Instead, though, we follow the rescue crew that goes out to find them after the Event Horizon ship surfaces after 7 years. We have Dr. Weir, Captain Miller, who are the two characters that we follow the most. They definitely have the most depth as far as the characters are concerned in this film. The others are entertaining. It's not like they're just blank wooden characters or anything like that, but there's not a whole lot to get invested in. I mean, we have tidbits for some of them, like Peters has a child back home that, there's a little information given about, she wanted to stay back from this mission in order to see her kid on his birthday and stuff like that with her. But other than that, for these side characters, there's really not a whole lot to get invested in, and that sucks because the two of the characters are actually really three, because Justin does end up technically surviving. I don't know how, but he does, and we'll get to that here in a second. Those are the characters that survive, and there's a sense of relief when characters survive a horror movie, but there's really not a whole lot to go off of because they were introduced and established so quickly. There's really not anything to get invested in. And yeah, that's definitely a complaint I have with the film. But the characters we do have, who are developed quite thoroughly, I would say, are Dr. Weir, number one, and Captain Miller, who I previously introduced. For Dr. Weir, I love the subversion of expectations. When this film begins, you definitely think he is going to be the lead protagonist of the film. Fish out of water type scenario. He is a scientist. He's the guy who built the Event Horizon. And, he is definitely a fish out of water. He is not used to being in this crew setting, and he's definitely just kind of an outcast. And one would assume, that would lead to him ultimately being the guy who saves the day, but fuck no, man. Besides the Event Horizon itself, he is the main fucking villain of this movie, because that ship, I previously mentioned the ship's immune system then attacks whoever enters it, and it does that by just reaching into your mind and pulling out the deepest, darkest traumas you have, and making you see things and hear things, and just makes you act on your most animalistic instincts, and just completely flips people's mental state upside down. And it's just such a brutal way to attack. Again, I could rave about it all day. Such a cool concept. And for Dr. Weir, it capitalizes on the fact that, he was so obsessed with building this thing. He was so obsessed with making it this perfect, just immaculate, flawless ship that he rejected everything else in his life, including his wife, who is shown multiple times in the film, and we're led to believe that she died at some point. But we are kind of in the dark about the subject matter until we find out that she killed herself simply out of loneliness. The person she loved most loved this fucking ship more than he did her. She ends up killing herself because of it, and that's pretty heavy shit, man, and it wears on him, and it wears on him, and the ship capitalizes on that, and it drives him fucking insane. The love that he has for this ship eventually becomes this evil desire to see this ship excel in its new purpose, which is, to just completely destroy and annihilate anything around it or in it. And that leads what we originally thought to be the main protagonist to the lead antagonist. And it's just such a cool subversion of expectation. And then you have Captain Miller, who is a very straight-laced, hard-nosed kind of guy, He's very no nonsense, and you find out throughout the movie as this ship starts to poke and prod at his brain that he had an experience, earlier on in his life and his time as a captain where he had to leave one of his crewmates to die, to be burned alive by an explosion, and just how sad that is, and how it just, again, it wears on him. And being that, thick-skinned guy, he's never told anybody about it. He never told a soul. And yet this ship knows about it. And this ship just starts to poke and prod at him and just pick all of these things in his brain. But thankfully, he is able to at least mostly fight off these visions and these impulses that he's dealing with. And we get a very, very entertaining final battle between the two of them that's filled with a lot of just really crazy imagery. And I love, that orb room where that fucking giant cylinder is just floating around. And it's basically where the Event Horizon gets its power from, that part of the ship. And, the whole thing is surrounded by fire in order for Weir to fuck with Miller even further. And by this point, again, some really, really good special effects and makeup in this movie as well. And Weir just looks absolutely fucking insane by the end of this movie. Like, he gouges his fucking eyes out. And, I know the CGI is definitely dated in some areas, for sure. You can label that as a complaint. I won't, because it's not like a Mortal Kombat Annihilation scenario or anything like that where it's just so fucking bad it's unbearable. Nothing to that effect, but it is, very, very dated for sure. But that's nothing that really ever bothers me, but it is what it is. As far as visuals and things of that nature, the positives definitely outweighs the negative. But moving on to something else, it is funny that I bring up Mortal Kombat Annihilation, because the previous film, titled just Mortal Kombat, was also directed by Paul W.S. Anderson. And he's most known for that, as well as the Resident Evil movies. It's actually, fun fact, he saw just how horrible Mortal Kombat Annihilation was, and he promised that he would never abandon a series again, and that's why he directed every single fucking Resident Evil movie. Or at least, I'm pretty sure he directed all of them. And if not directed, he had a very key role in all of them, in some form or fashion. And that leads me to, not a negative with this film, but certainly a question that I ponder a lot. And that is, ever since, seeing the film. Paul W.S. Anderson has a very distinct style when it comes to his films. I just mentioned the Resident Evil movies and Mortal Kombat and, some of the other stuff that he's done. He has a very action-based, approach when it comes to horror. And there's nothing wrong with that in certain cases. Say what you will about the Resident Evil movies. I know those movies kind of wane in quality depending on which one you watch, but the subject matter and the idea of those movies lends itself to an action horror, style. My problem is I don't think Event Horizon really does. I think the concept here, it's an amazing concept. Like I said, I love it. I think it would have benefited from a much more visceral, slow-paced, brooding style. This movie definitely has its brutal moments. Don't get me wrong. It is not lacking in the violence department whatsoever. And we'll talk about that with Kill of the Film. But I think that action horror style of Paul W.S. Anderson definitely bleeds into the film quite a bit. And it doesn't ruin the film for me by any means. It's not like I think this is a bad movie because of it. I just personally think the plot could have benefited from a little longer runtime and a little slower pacing. I think that, if you put this in the hands of somebody else, another director, who is more experienced with that style, I really, really wonder what this film could have been like. Again, I don't hate this movie. I don't think Paul W.S. Anderson did a bad job or anything like that. It's just, I think the tone could have been a little different. And I think we debatably would have had a better film. Again, just my thoughts, just how I feel. And yeah, man. But that's not to take away from the film that we did get, because I think it is a very, very fucking fun time. It's a blast. And if you were to ask me if I recommend it, 100%. Not a lot of people have seen this one. I didn't. I hadn't seen it. And it's definitely one that flies under a lot of people's radar. And while I hear love and I hear praise for the movie, still not a lot of people, I don't hear it spoken about a lot. And that's a shame, because I think this is a really fun film. Flawed in some areas, sure. But, you know, fucking what film isn't, you know? You could find problems with the best fucking movies ever. It's how it works. Art is subjective. That's all there is to it. But that will do it for the film review aspect of this video. But you know what we gotta do now, baby? We gotta get into the blood, the guts, and the gory bits. We gotta get into my Kill the Film. Stick around. As I mentioned before, Event Horizon was a film that I heard praised quite a bit. For multiple reasons. A lot of people saying it reminds them a lot of the Alien movies, the good Alien movies. A lot of people praising the plot, which I 100% share in that opinion. What I wasn't prepared for when I first watched this film is just how fucking brutal it is. You know, I'm not going to act like it's just a complete splatter gore fest or anything like that, but from what we do get, holy fuck, man. It is some brutal space age fucking horror shit going on here, man, and I really, really love it. Kicking us off here, it's not a kill necessarily, because he does end up surviving, but the scene with Justin going into the airlock and setting it off just because he was transported to that hellish universe for a little bit, and he saw just how awful and horrible it was, to the point where he just wants to fucking die. So he fucking launches himself out of the airlock, man. And he does end up getting saved by Miller, who is outside the ship, repairing their ship in order to leave. But yeah, man, he came really fucking close. He starts, like, as the gravity and the oxygen starts to get sucked out of that room, his eyes start fucking bleeding and shit. And he starts getting all cold and he can't breathe and his chest is collapsing in on him. And he does end up floating out into space. And he's not out there for very long, but he is fucked up, man. He's coughing up blood and he has to basically get put into this fucking Bacta tank. The Star Wars nerd in me doesn't really know what else to call it. He's just kind of put on ice, basically, for the rest of the film, but he does end up technically surviving, and you do see him at the end. That is one thing I didn't mention in the review portion. A very, very abrupt ending. You know, we get that final battle between Weir and Miller, and he ends up, you know, Miller ends up sacrificing himself and blowing up the Event Horizon, and Stark and Cooper are able to get back to their ship alongside Justin, who is in that Bacta tank. And, you know, she wakes up from this nightmare, and, like, Cooper's consoling her, and it's just this very, and then it just ends. It's a very abrupt, crazy ending. I have a feeling that was some weird editing, snafu shit. Just odd. But anyways, on to the kill of the film, right? Some honorable mentions real quick. DJ getting dissected by Weir, who has his eyeballs fucking plucked out and shit. Really, really good gory stuff there. You don't see a whole lot of it, but you do see the aftermath, and his innards are all over the fucking operating table, and he's just strung up. Definitely reminds me of the scene from Midsommar, where one of the guests had a similar fate. And for runner-up, damn near was my kill of the film, just because it's so fucking disturbing and just so gross. What little glimpses you get of it, it gives you a peek into the hell that the original Event Horizon crew went through, and just how fucking just awful it was, and just how awful those deaths were. You see, it's the video that the rescue crew eventually ends up watching. They're not able to at first, so they can't really figure out what happened, but they de-scramblize it, or whatever future talk shit you want to say. But they end up unscrambling the footage, and what we end up seeing is just fucking people getting their guts torn the fuck out, people getting a fucking arm shoved through someone's face and like shoving it down their fucking throat, and then when it comes out, all this blood and innards and shit just starts flying out of their mouth. There's one guy who's just surrounded by his crewmates that have just gone insane, and you can't really tell what the fuck they're doing, but they're, I guess, ripping him apart or something. And the standout of this little scene here was that one crew member who, much like Weir eventually does, he gouges his eyeballs out. You don't see him do it, but what you do see is him, like, holding his eyes, just very proudly displaying them to the camera. I can't remember what he says. It might have been something in Latin, but I can't remember exactly what it was, but he says some shit, and he's just so happy that he gouged his fucking eyeballs out. And as brief as that scene is, you get a lot of shit in very quick successions. Just absolutely gross shit. Almost was my kill of the film, but I gotta give it to Peters, man. Oh my god. You know, throughout the film, as I mentioned, she is the one who, you know, it's explained that, you know, she wanted to see her kid on his birthday, but she had to go on this last minute mission that they were called to. And so once the Event Horizon starts fucking with her, it starts, you know, she starts seeing her kid. And, you know, her kid runs off, and as soon as they're getting ready to split, she sees her kid run towards that big fucking orb room. And, you know, obviously she's not thinking straight, because the Event Horizon does not allow you to think straight. So she starts running after her kid. And what ends up happening is she just falls. It's not a very complicated or complex kill scene. It's just Peters falling down this fucking shaft. And when she lands... Well, before that, I should mention that, you know, she falls, and then she starts clipping the walls, and you see just her body get absolutely crushed against these things as she falls down. And then by the time she lands in the water and in this, you know, room where that orb is just floating, you just see her body crash into the water, and it just looks like her body is just crushed. Like, as soon as she hits the ground, it's one of the most realistic, you know, impacts I've seen of, like, someone falling from a great height. It just looks like every bone in her body just disintegrates. It's fucking disgusting. And it is 100% my kill of the film. Event Horizon, man. Really, really fun shit here, dude. 100% fun. Just a blast. And I 100% recommend that you check it out. Yeah, man. Like I said, apologies for such a late fucking review. I'm sorry. It's just sometimes life gets in the way, man, as we all know. But I'm still happy, late as ever, but I'm happy that I get to come up here every week and do this shit, because I love it. Thank you guys, as always, for stopping by. And next time on Days of Darkness, we are going to be getting into the Purge series review when we review The Purge. Very excited to go back and check that one out. Ethan Hawke and all. I'm curious to see what I think about it with a modern lens. And also, in between, you know, this review and that review, I have a bonus video for you. That's right, you had to wait a little longer into the weekend, going into the week, to get this video, but it is not going to go unrewarded because we are going to be doing another mystery box unboxing of fucking DVDs. Those of you who know how that went for me last time, did not go very well, but I know you guys really enjoyed it, and to be honest, I enjoyed it too, because it was just fucking goofy as all shit. And yeah, man, so I'm getting ready to record that one right after I get done with this. Yeah, be looking forward to that. And as always, guys, thank you for stopping by. Thank you for supporting the dream. And as always, for the love of all things gory, keep watching horror. Alright, guys. See you next time.